our wonderful senator from Alabama.
Thank you. Mr. President, a truly amazing thing is happening in our nation right now. The sitting vice president is actually running for election by running from her record. After 35 months in office, she is promising change from her own administration. Her day one was actually January 2021, but she's trying to convince the American people that things were going to be different this time around. And it's not just that she's promising change for our country, it's that she says she herself has seemingly changed overnight. Just about every unpopular policy position imaginable that she has taken and been on the record supporting for years, well, now that she's up for election, she no longer believes those things. Let's just look at a sampling of policy positions that the vice president has held. Let's start with energy and economic security. She supported enforcing an EV mandate that would take gas-powered vehicles off the road, ending offshore drilling, banning fracking, eliminating private health insurance, and raising taxes by trillions. But it doesn't stop there, and it just gets worse for public safety and border security. She supported decreasing funding for the police, abolishing ICE, decriminalizing illegal border crossings, ending the detention of illegal border crossers, giving taxpayer-funded benefits to illegal border crossers, defending sanctuary city policies, vowing to block all border wall funding, and even using taxpayer funds for gender transition surgeries for illegal aliens and federal prisoners. These are some of the most radical positions it's possible to take, and that's why she was actually ranked as the most far-left senator when she was a member of this body. Now that she's president of the Senate, she's her party's nominee for president, and she's her party's leader. Again, she claims she's changed some of her own policy positions. So today, we're going to give her party and the chamber she leads an opportunity to prove whether that's true. To paraphrase the majority leader from his remarks yesterday, we are going to give our Democratic colleagues another chance to show the American people where they stand. We'll start today with a few bills related to energy and border security, and we can continue this every day the Senate is in session moving forward. The American people will be watching, and I look forward to seeing what happens today. We're going to go ahead and start with the Wall Act. Last year, I introduced the Wall Act. This legislation is common sense and with a clear aim. It would appropriate funding needed to finish actually building a barrier on our southern border. And it would accomplish that without raising taxes and without adding to our national debt. For all of you in the gallery, we are $35 trillion in debt. That's not just fiscally irresponsible, that's morally irresponsible. And for the first time ever, we paid more money on the interest on our national debt than we did for our national defense. You can look over time, and the moment that any nation does that, it begins to become a nation in decline. So, I wanted to make sure that we had something that had a common sense approach. And through the Wall Act, construction of a border wall would be funded by eliminating taxpayer-funded entitlements and tax benefits for illegal border crossers. The bill would also close loopholes that allows illegal border crossers to receive taxpayer-funded benefits intended for citizens and lawful residents. Finally, this legislation would impose fines on individuals who illegally enter the United States or overstay their visas. In 2018, the Joint Committee on Taxation estimated that the tax components of this bill alone would save $33 billion over 10 years. Let's use these funds to build a border wall and to help keep Americans safe. So today, we're giving Senate Democrats a very clear choice. Now, watch what happens next very closely. Let's see how they answer these questions. Do they support building a border wall, or will they block building a border wall? Do they want to spend taxpayer funds on keeping American citizens and legal residents safe, or do they want to keep those taxpayer funds funding illegal border crossers? Where does Vice President's party stand on these very different policy positions? Well, we're about to find out. As if in legislative session, and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Finance Committee be discharged from further consideration of S332 and the Senate proceed to an immediate consideration. I further ask that the bill be considered, read for a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
The President pro tem.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. Border Patrol has very serious needs that actually need funding, namely new technology, and we should focus on how we get those done in a bipartisan way. We have limited resources. We know a border wall is ineffective and really has no impact in preventing the cartels from bringing fentanyl into our country. I, for one, would prefer we direct those resources towards stopping fentanyl from getting to our communities through our ports of entry along the southwest border. No one should forget there was a bipartisan proposal on border policy changes earlier this year, one that Senate Republicans strongly endorsed, one that was frankly probably more conservative than I would have preferred. But instead of voting to so much as take it up for consideration, Republicans decided then that instead they wanted to campaign on the border as they are attempting to do with this proposal. Because one man, Donald Trump, told them, kill the bill. Trump told Senate Republicans he wanted to let a fire burn so he could campaign on the ashes, and Senate Republicans said, yes, Mr. Trump. I think that history tells us how serious the effort before us today is. But just like when I built the bipartisan border funding bill with my ranking member, Senator Collins, I do look forward to working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle on comprehensive immigration reform and serious solutions to the challenges we are facing at the border. The door is always open. Today, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President, I see my colleague from Oklahoma here and would love to have the opportunity to hear about his bill.
Our friend from Oklahoma. Hi.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator from Alabama, for doing this. I think it's very important that we understand what's happening in our economy right now with the energy issue and the energy crisis we find ourselves in. And so the bill that I bring forth today is Protecting American Energy Production Act. It's real simple. It allows us to be energy independent. You know, the backbone of our economy is energy. And if you have high energy costs, which we've had a 37% increase in energy underneath this current administration, you obviously are going to have inflation increase because energy is the backbone of our economy. You cannot make a product, nor can you deliver the product without factoring in the cost of energy. With a 37% energy increase over the last 4 years, we have to bring back that resilience. We got to bring back that energy independence. And the way we do that is we understand real numbers. For instance, in 2019, fracking, which our current vice president has been on record saying that she wants to ban fracking. In 2019, fracking accounted for 63% of our total crude oil production and 75% of our natural gas supply. Underneath the current administration, we've seen a significant decline in fracking wells, and at the same time, we haven't seen demand decrease. We've actually seen demand increase, which by the amount that it's actually been taken away from oil or from American producers, now we've seen an increase in imports. Not all of them are friends of ours. So as I said, the bill is very simple, Protecting American Energy Production Act. So as if in the legislation session, and now with Standing Rule 22, I've asked unanimous consent that the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 1121 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, the bill to be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President,
Our senator from Oregon.
reserving the right to object. My colleague, who I'm pleased to work with on a number of issues, has come to the floor with a unanimous consent request that would constrain the power of our president to protect our public lands. And so, while we may agree on a number of things, and I hope that doesn't hurt his reputation back home, on this particular proposal, I do bring a different perspective. I think in my role working on the Interior Committee and understanding that the authority we have granted the President is so essential to making sure that the lands that are publicly held remain a treasure for every single American. And it's not that long ago, well, it seems like quite a few years now, maybe a decade, I attended a hearing in which a number of folks came forward to explain different damages that had occurred to the water table in their community from fracking. Now, in this case, my real concern here is about constraining the President's ability to protect our treasures, our public lands, from these types of effects. And I think Americans who have traveled our national parks and our BLM land and our Forest Service land understand that this is a responsibility that we in the Senate take very seriously. But there's also a little bit more to my concern here as well. One is that if we're going to tackle climate chaos, we have to have international cooperation. And if we continuously say we're going to reduce the ability of the United States to have policies and abilities to address our own production of fossils, then of course every other country is like, well, the United States and China are the biggest producers of climate gases, both methane, known publicly as natural gas, but methane gas. They have very large footprints. If they're not going to act, why should we act? So if we want to address this challenge and sustain international cooperation, we can't be consistently restricting the potential flexibility of our president. The third is that the climate impact in my home state is very substantial. We have seen a loss of snowpack in the Cascades that is devastating the water in late spring and early summer to our ranchers and farmers. Our rural foundation, our rural pillar is our farming and our ranching. And when you constrain the water in our rivers because of the dropping snowpack, that's a big impact. And in addition, our water tables have been dropping that many farmers have depended on. In fact, we're investing heavily in piping our irrigation ditches at huge expense, knowing how precious every drop of water is. So if we care about our rural areas, we have to take on climate chaos. And not just our farmers and ranchers, our foresters too, because we are seeing significant devastation to Oregon's famous forests over drought and insect infestation with climate chaos. Now, of course, it's not just Oregon that's affected. Every single state is affected. I was very concerned earlier this summer, when I heard about the 115 to 120 degrees in a heat dome that passed over my colleague's state and the impact that was having. I think every state has their effects that they're experiencing. So this is a big issue that we need to wrestle with. And this brings me to the fourth item mentioned about energy security. In the last 4 years, under the Biden administration, we have become energy independent. There has been a vast increase in the production of oil and a vast increase in the production of gas. As a result, we are now the largest producer of oil and gas, and we are the largest exporter of gas. Now, here's kind of the interesting little piece here, is that the goal of the gas industry is to export gas and raise prices on Americans. So it's more expensive for Americans to heat their homes and heat their water. But we could do the opposite. We could, in fact, say we're going to repeal the 2015 law that put us into the world market and created these massive exports and lower the price here in America for our families. That's a much better idea than raising the prices. Let's lower the prices. In fact, here's the thing. Let's start right now by ending our exports of oil and gas to China. Now, my colleagues just not so long ago advocated that we end any sale of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China. With good reason. Why should we lower their prices and increase our prices? But that is true for the exports that are going of oil and gas as well. So let's stand together on both sides of the aisle. Let's lower the price for American consumers and ban these exports to China. And for that reason, I've prepared just such a solution and an opportunity to have it embraced by my colleagues. And so I turn to the formality here that I asked the senator to modify his request and that the Merkley substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table so that we will have the ability to end these exports to China and lower the prices for American consumers.
Is there an objection to the modification?
I reserve the right to object.
Our senator from Oklahoma.
While I understand my colleague from Oregon, where he stands on this issue, there's just some factual things that need to be checked on that. One, when it's said that we're the #1 exporter of gas, just not true. Russia is the #1 exporter of gas. When they say that production has increased, that's actually not accurate either. Could we have been the largest liquefied natural gas export? Yes, that was until the permits for the pipelines to go to export terminals in Louisiana was canceled, which put a lot of our allies in Europe in a situation to where now they had to go buy gas from a bad actor that's right now invading Ukraine called Russia. Our allies do not want to be dependent, obviously, on Russia. They would love to have our gas. And as far as being the #1 seller to oil or #1 seller to China with crude and refined products is not true. Again, at current rate, Iran is the #1 seller to China. And they are the ones that are buying it because of Biden-Harris administration being extremely weak on the sanctions that we put on Iran underneath the Trump administration, which now Iran is actively funding the Houthis and Hamas and terrorist organizations all around the world. What we're saying is let our allies count on us. We have more reserves underneath our feet, and we can produce it cleaner and more efficient than OPEC, than Russia, and then Iran. Our allies want to do business with us. And our economy desperately needs it. We're in a recession and no one's denying that. Why should we depend on allowing OPEC to set the world price for crude? Why are we allowing them to set the price and become rich off of our backs when we ourselves could easily do that in a much cleaner and more efficient way? Why are we still importing petroleum products from Russia? Why are we still importing oil, which is a dirty crude from Saudi Arabia, when we can still produce it, a sweet crude that comes out of Oklahoma, that comes out of North Dakota, comes out of Pennsylvania, that comes out of Texas? That's a much easier product to refine and burns cleaner. And there's no denying that, because the world's demand for fossil fuels is increasing, not decreasing. So why are we doing it at the cost of the American taxpayer? Why are we hurting our economy along the way? As far as the change that my colleague from Oregon wants to do, it's not necessary. The change isn't there. This is just to try to kill the bill, because the legislation that's my colleague is trying to do, that we already know the president currently already has the authority to restrict oil and gas exports, because he did exactly that earlier this year, which is why I brought up Louisiana. All this does is deflect blame away from the Biden-Harris administration, who has been very soft on sanctions with bad actors, as I mentioned, Iran, the majority of which are bought, as I mentioned before, by China. And as I mentioned before, this does nothing but enable Iran, when they sell their product, to sponsor the largest groups around the world operating in the terror organizations. The bill my colleague from Oregon is raising today would do nothing to address the massive amounts of Russian oil flowing into China. And what Republicans are trying to do here today is bolster American energy production by preventing this administration from future administrations from banning fracking. As I said, as the current vice president openly said in 2019, she was 100% for banning fracking across the United States. So with that, I have to object to my colleague from Oregon's legislation and changes to my current bill.
The objection to the modification is heard. Is there objection to the original request?
Mr. President, reserving the
from
right
Oregon.
to object. A couple points. The first is that my colleague mentioned that the bill I'm proposing would restrict our ability to support our allies who count on us. Actually, my bill is about stopping the exports to China. They are not our ally, last I checked. We're in competition with them, and these exports are making their life easier and their economy stronger and making things more expensive for us here in the United States of America. If you want more available for allies, hey, let's stop the exports to China. It is actually compatible with the goal my colleague suggested. The second is he challenged the question, and I realize we're doing this on short notice, so we have various facts flying around, but about whether the U.S. was the largest exporter of natural gas last year. So I have in front of me the information from the Energy Information Administration that produces all the stats on this, and the headline is, the United States was the world's largest liquefied natural gas exporter in 2023. Now, a third point. Outside of North America, China is the largest recipient of our gas. We are directing more gas to China, what we're in competition with, than any other nation. That's just a little bit crazy. And I want to support our allies. I want to support our consumers at home who are lower prices. So I'm disappointed that I didn't win over your support with my presentation. But given that I'd much prefer to have a bill that lowers prices rather than one that endangers our public lands and raises prices for our consumers, I object.
The objection is heard.
One quick response on this. My colleague is correct about the LNG, liquefied natural gas. What my colleague said in his remarks was natural gas. Natural gas is much different than shipping liquefied natural gas. Liquefied natural gas is a small percentage of what is exported in as far as we call for natural gas. Once it's liquefied, what actually is by far the biggest, is the pipelines that this administration approved, which President Trump put a hold on, going into Germany for the second time. So my original statement is true. Russia is the largest export of natural gas. Once again, this wasn't to do anything, as my colleague said, talking about China. The export ban to which the administration put on the exporting of LNG out of Louisiana by canceling the permits, that affected Europe. They are allies of ours. If this administration wanted to do something about China, they could do it today. They could do it this hour. They could do it right now by an executive order. Last I checked, they still have the authority to do so. So as I go back, my colleague from Oregon's change to my current bill modification does nothing. The current administration currently already has that authority. That I'll yield back.
Our senator from Massachusetts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, very much. Yeah, this proposal really deserves to be objected to. You know, it really deserves an objection, because what we really have to say here is that we object to this bill as a ridiculous attack, Republican attack, on the authority of the executive branch. But we don't need to talk about how this bill would work. Let's talk about why this bill is the bill that the Republicans are pushing. Are they lining up here to protest something worthy like public health? No. Are they demanding we deliver something meaningful like clean air or clean water? No. Are they taking a stand for the future that worries moms and dads and parents and grandparents and neighbors and young people who are asking us to fight for those things? No. So what are the Republicans doing? They're protecting the profits of fossil fuel companies. They're delivering our doctors to oil and gas exporters. They're taking a stand against a clean, healthy, sustainable future. What a track record. What a track record that they have. These companies are fracturing American lands to produce gas for fossil fuel executives to export out of our country to the highest global bidder. They want to export this. And who takes the environmental risks? Well, the families who live nearby, who are going to be near these pipelines. And then the companies take it to the first port they can get it to, and then send it out of our country. Do they want to keep it here to lower the price of natural gas for American consumers? Absolutely not. They want to get it out on the open market in a ship, because that's the highest bidder around the world. Let them bid for it. Now, if they were saying, hey, we really want to lower the price of natural gas in the United States, that's one thing, but that's not what this is all about. It's all about an export plan. Get the oil, get the gas out of our country, and get the highest price in the world. They're putting wells filled with toxic chemicals next to schools, your homes, your daycare, your hospitals. Also, they can ship tankers filled with natural gas to China or any other country that's the highest bidder. That's what this is all about, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about lowering the price of natural gas or oil for American consumers. It's about oil company executives getting higher profits for themselves. The United States exported a record-shattering amount of natural gas in 2023, more than 10% higher than in 2022. We export more liquefied natural gas than any other country in the world. And what do we get for all this planet-destroying emissions? While big oil and House Republicans say that those fossil fuel exports are good for the economy, soaring LNG exports actually cost big bucks, with Americans spending $111 billion more on natural gas as exports soared from 2021 to 2022. While many justify the rapid natural gas export build-out as critical for European energy security, the reality is that European gas demand is not only already met, it's declining. So we're not using this frack gas here in the U.S. We're not benefiting from exports of this frack gas. In fact, it raises prices at home as we export the oil, as we export the gas. If we kept it here, it would put pressure on the price of natural gas and oil here in the United States. But they don't keep it here. They put it on ships to send it around the world. This frack gas is a reason that prices are going up in the United States. And our allies aren't demanding a surge in fracked gas. So who benefits from this fight for fracked gas? In 2023 alone, the 15 biggest oil and gas companies made more than $172 billion in profit. That's money that directly comes out of household budgets for fuel, for electricity, and even food and other necessities affected by the high prices. Gas companies and oil companies are running the same old-fashioned playbook for their dinosaur products, fossils. Drill and shill their fuels as hard as they can. And as we stop moving towards clean energy, these fossil fuel executives are trying to get other countries hooked and exporting product to keep prices high at home. So that's a crazy economic strategy for the United States. Building export terminals to take our own oil and gas that should be here and lowering the price for consumers, for our businesses, for our homeowners, for our commercial sector. But no, they say put it on the open market around the world and leave less of it here for American consumers. So just as we can track earthquakes in states that have large fracking and be able to see that that's happening, we can track this fracking defense bill to the companies that will benefit from it. This bill does nothing to protect Americans' health, or the communities, or the future, or even their budgets. It protects fossil fuel companies from having to answer for their actions and pay for their profiteering. And for that reason, I stand in support of Senator Merkley's objection to this, because this is not a policy which we should allow to go permanently unaddressed in our country. It's time we have the big debate about the impact exporting our oil and gas has upon domestic prices. You can't have it both ways. You can't say this is good for America because we're exporting it and not understand it. The less that we have here is the lower the pressure is to lower the prices for ordinary Americans. So when you look at all the polling and it says people are concerned about high energy prices, people are concerned about our economy, what's at the center of it? What's at the center of it is oil and gas and high prices. And what this proposal does is say, just keep it going. Send it to China, send it to other countries around the world, but know at the same time, in the same way we're importing lower-priced Chinese goods, we're going to be sending them even more materials that allow them to become more dominant as an economic power. So I support Senator Merkley's objection, and I hope that we actually come to the day where we have a full-blown debate here on the Senate floor on the impact, this export of oil and gas, this impact that fracked materials with chemicals in the soil of our country have upon the totality of our economic and environmental justice issues in our society. And with that, Madam President, I yield.
Madam President,
Senator from Alabama.
I'd like to give my distinguished colleague from Oklahoma an opportunity to respond and thank him for his leadership on the Protecting American Energy Production Act. But prior to that, I ask unanimous consent that Jackson Floyd Lovern, an intern in my office, be granted floor privileges until September 19th, 2024.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's interesting to me that my colleague from Massachusetts is lecturing us on energy prices when the last time I checked, Massachusetts has the highest cost of energy to heat their homes in the nation. When he starts calling fracking a dinosaur technology, when the last time I checked, Boston had one of the collective largest group of individuals still heating their homes off heating oil and propane. Infrastructure is what creates an opportunity to bring down energy cost, which is why Oklahoma, on the other hand, which embraces fracking and embraces pipelines, has the lowest energy cost on average around the country. So if we really want to talk about bringing down cost for consumer, let's look at a model that works instead of having someone lecture us from a state that their model doesn't work. We can build infrastructure. We'd love to build pipelines in Massachusetts, but they block them. The infrastructure would be awesome. I know there's a tremendous amount of companies that would love to supply natural gas to Massachusetts. In fact, there's a pipeline right now ready to go that's been blocked. So let's have some serious conversations, not just lay blame and call CEOs bad names and give false opinions that they're just wanting to export. This does nothing about exporting. This is talking about becoming energy independent so we don't have to import oil. We don't have to import refined products. This is about becoming energy dependent so we can bring down energy cost. As I said earlier, the current policy that we are operating under with the Biden-Harris administration has brought energy costs up by 37%, which is directly affecting every single American's pocketbook today, right now as we speak. That's why every single American out there is paying $1,085 more per month in their household bills and grocery bills than they were 4 years ago. Which, if you think about that, that's over $13,000 a year, directly reflecting our current energy policy. This does exactly what it's supposed to do. Help bring down the energy cost, and inflation will follow. It's not hard math, it's common sense. With that, I'll yield back.
Madam President,
Senator from Alabama.
I could not agree more with my distinguished colleague from Oklahoma. It is important that we're not only energy independent, but that we are energy dominant. The truth is, we do it better, cleaner, and more efficiently than anyone. And we know the cost of energy affects everything, from whether you're at the gas pump, to heating and cooling your home, to the prices you see at the grocery store. At the end of the day, the American people are hurting. They're hurting under the policies of this administration. We have now seen the vice president, as a presidential candidate, say all of a sudden she's okay with fracking. Today we saw that her party doesn't stand behind her. I'd like to hear what my distinguished colleague from Utah has to say about another opportunity that we've seen in front of us, where candidate Harris is very different than the woman that we have seen serve.